Hello, folks. Thanks for taking the afternoon to spend some time with us. Thanks to the online audience watching as well. It's quite a privilege to be here, of course, coming down from Toronto. Nikon USA and Nikon Canada don't often get enough chances to collaborate, so this is a really great opportunity for all of us. So, as Mike said, my name is Neil Osborne. I'm a conservation photographer. Just to get a show of hands, who's heard of the term conservation photography before? Okay, a few hands. That's nice to see, but it just goes to show that this is still a new term. So I wanted to take the afternoon to just break down what conservation photography is and what I do with my work. I've been entitled to talk people, planet, and protected places. As a conservation photographer, I use the camera to express the integral link between people and planet. And through the camera, I have an opportunity to tell the story about this people and planet connection. It's really about how a photograph could start a dialogue, how a photograph could start a conversation, just like we are today. And I just wanted to show you how it all got started for me. On a beach in Costa Rica, it went something like this. Bear with us.
You filming this?
You better believe it, buddy. Small wave coming in, small wave coming in. Just watch your camera, dude. Yeah, I'm good. Okay, go, 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 go.
She's resting.
That's fine. Wave, wave, wave. Wave. Yeah, I don't want your camera getting wet though, do you?
Almost home, baby. There you go.
Watch out. Wave, wave. Wave. Bigger wave.
Ah. There she goes.
I still got her. Wave.
Fine. There better be a picture amongst that. Oh man.
How did that make you feel, buddy?
She didn't mind us at all. Did she?
Didn't seem like it.
Not at all. Oh man. Fun.
The eloquence of my brother's narration always reminds me of our time together there, but I have to be very honest, we didn't really know what we were doing. It was my very first magazine assignment for Santa Cruz Magazine of all places, and really we were just stumbling our way through. We were trying to make an image that may end up as a double spread in the magazine. We were trying to make an image that would speak to an audience about the importance of Tortuguero National Park, a really important nesting beach for green sea turtles in Costa Rica. This is that beach, and this is mostly what we took photographs of. We were taking photographs of our tracks. On lucky days, we got to take pictures of turtle tracks, so we got pretty good at doing that. You could appreciate the frustration that was starting to build. And that frustration continued at night. We started to make images. Believe it or not, there's a turtle in there somewhere. There's the turtle's head. For the longest time, this was one of my favorite images, and I didn't take the damn thing. The camera and the remote flashes we were tinkering with accidentally went off. And so again, our frustrations were continued. But on the occasion of the sky turning purple for a few moments, I put an orange gel on an old Nikon speedlight, and we think we made the image that the editor was going to be happy with. And it turns out she was. She really liked this image. But it was this one that would end up to have an unexpected outcome. I found this image in the editing room many months later. And it was this one, like I mentioned, that would end up having an unexpected outcome. I missed it in the early rounds of the first few edits. And believe it or not, I even missed I remember not seeing the plastic bottle when I first made the image, so perhaps this is an indication of how comfortable I was with some of my pictures at the time. I really don't remember seeing the plastic bottle, so funny enough, this particular image ends up on the back of a postcard that gets distributed to 12,000 students in China as part of a Plastics in Our Oceans campaign. And so what the image began to tell me is I could be using my photography to have a greater purpose. I could put my images to work with an opportunity to share a message. And so it's this image that I think about quite often, and I've even identified it as probably the very first conservation photograph that I've made. So we're beginning to paint a story about what conservation photography is all about. Connecting people and planet through my photography has become my life's work. It's also something that I try to recognize as a real privilege. It's changed the way I make sense of the world. It's changed the way I make sense of gatherings like this. It's changed the stories that I share with my nieces when I come back from the ocean or a jungle somewhere. And so what I've started to appreciate is how powerful photography can be to share this message about people and planet and our connection to nature. This worldview, influenced by the way we see the world, our passions, and in my case, a passion for conserving the natural world, allows us to start to see natural elements in a different way. We begin to see the biosphere in a different way. Here's a good example. On the beach known as the Neck in the Falklands, you see wind and the natural elements dance among penguins. Air and shadows linger in these really intricate ways that I'm still trying to sort out in this particular image. This is in the Pacific Northwest in Canada. And in the inaccessible Bugaboo Ranges that some of you may know out of Alberta, you get a chance to see wilderness in its truest form, raw, pointing these formations towards the unknown, perhaps an indication of something that might come. In an Idaho river, we see biological life as it should be, its tales full of history. And in Florida, we see water try to navigate its way through human-constructed barriers. You can see the manatee trying to make its way through too. Through the camera and through my lens, I've found fire in places where it perhaps should not be. Maybe it's a fictitious nightmare come true. But we're constantly reminded about fire and light and how comforting it can be, particularly in the Arctic when it can be minus 50 below. So by way of these observations, using my camera, trying to pay more attention to the natural elements in the biosphere, I've noticed something. And what I've noticed is, in those places that we find sacred and dear to us, they seem to be enveloped in light. In those places where our story has a different ending, we see darkness. This is Haida Gwaii. It's a Haida heritage site, again in northern British Columbia. The light shines strong there. Really unusual lighting situation I came across. And we're reminded about the natural elements. And I'm beginning to think that they're telling us something. I'm beginning to think there's a message behind the natural elements. This is the Brazilian Amazon, and I had the good fortune of spending some time with the Kayapo, and they showed me their territory, they showed me their land. This is what it looks like now, but likely some of you have heard about the dam construction that's occurring on some of these rivers. And in that environment, there's different stories that we hear. We hear the stories about industry, but we also hear the stories about the cultures and what they have to say about things. In the light and in the darkness, one thing has become very clear to me, and that is the natural elements are sharing a very poignant message with us. And that message is that we are not apart from nature, but very much a part of it. Similarly to the biosphere, cultures around the world are sharing similar messages with us as well. My dear friend and mentor, Wade Davis, who some of you may know, in his own eloquent words, describes this collective voice of the cultures around the world that are sharing stories with us. Even what's happening here, all of the conversations, all of the dialogues, in his own eloquent words, he describes the ethnosphere as this. Just take a moment to have a look at it. You can just imagine all the dreams and the myths and the ideas and the inspirations that are collecting here. And what I've seen through my camera is cultures around the world are talking about this. And this is what I think I can report, that in the ethnosphere there's some pretty incredible stories, and all you really need to do is listen. This is a community meeting in Indonesia. We're just listening to what they have to say. Of course, it's full of all sorts of stories. This is Isang. Isang thinks he's 45. I had to chuckle when he told me that. His dad taught him to climb. He's been climbing for over 20 years. He's never fallen. He's never afraid. I had a chance to take a portrait of him one afternoon, around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, which will be significant in a couple more slides. This is Isang banging in a 5-inch peg into a sealong tree, and sealong means big tree with honey. So one afternoon, Isang starts pegging in the route that he's going to climb. One by one, more people started to show up to watch Isang peg the sealong tree, and he did so with 51 pegs in total. It wasn't until midnight, after they go through a series of ceremonials, they needed coffee and a long list of other things to get ready to make the climb in search for the honey. I made an image that I believe still continues to represent this people and planet connection. And so it's a good example of what I'm trying to do with my work. I want this to be displayed in gatherings like this. I want images like this to be in bank halls. I want images like this to be in magazines, because it allows me to start a conversation with you folks about this people and planet connection. This is my friend Howard. He's an Inuit from the Canadian Arctic. When I took his portrait, it took me a second to appreciate that he had a wolverine wrapped around his neck. The wolverine fur is the best fur to be wearing in the Arctic. It keeps you warm when it gets wet. And Howard told me we're not telling traditional stories like we used to. We're not telling enough of the traditional stories. And so what that means is we're losing stories in the ethnosphere. We're losing stories about us. We're losing stories about the planet. And when the stories of culture, when the stories of the ethnosphere meet up and join forces with the facts of hard science, we have an opportunity to really question what is our overarching narrative. We have an opportunity to question that balance between people and planet. So through the literal, we see our connection to this place we call home, and the metaphors that perhaps are indications of what might come. These are manatees. We've scarred our home and the beings that inhabit it. But as a pathological optimist, I truly believe we're onto something. And of course, we can make images of hope, humanity's expression of what also could be the story behind our presence here. So through my travels with the camera, what I have been witnessing and observing is in the biosphere, there's things being told to us. The cultures, our stories are being told to us. They're sharing a really important message. We're not apart from nature, but very much a part of it. So I express my photography trying to start this dialogue about people and planet. I do so most often in protected areas like national parks or marine reserves, but also in those places that still need protection, such as deforested wilderness or polluted oceans and things like this. And Nikon's lucky enough to help me out with sharing some big lenses to do the work. You pick me up and you drop me somewhere, and my mission is to come back with an image or a series of images that make the person or the place or the issue or the thing relevant to each and every one of you. And that's a difficult thing to do these days. How do you make an image that's going to connect with you and you and you and you? And of course, the influencers of the world. How are we going to put images in front of the influencers that can help us share this message? I had the good fortune of testing Nikon's Key Mission lineup that I'm hoping most of you have had a chance to touch, the Key Mission 360 and the 170 in particular. It's close to minus 40 degrees here. Really, really cold, but happy to report that that Key Mission certainly was working really, really well. If you want to see some of this footage, please do check me out online. We're going to be doing more work in the Canadian Arctic. Why? Because we've got to protect places up there, and we've got to use photography to share those stories. I want to shift gears for the second part of my talk and take you to a really special place. So I'll draw your attention to the area in the orange. This is known as the Kutsumateen Provincial Park. We know it as Canada's only grizzly bear sanctuary. And then Kutsumateen truly is a special place. And so as a visual storyteller, I have to find a way to create an image, a series of images, that will take you to the Kutsumateen, that will make the Kutsumateen relatable in some particular way. What I want to do for the next 10 minutes or so is walk you through the process of how I build a visual narrative, how I build a visual story out. Before each trip, I take the opportunity to try to pre-visualize what these images might look like. And despite my love-hate relationship with social media, I'm learning it's another neat way to express the story so people can come along with the journey with me. I literally think of specific images that I have to try and make, such as a bear and a reflection in the water. I try to be as creative as I can to propel people through my visual narrative, just like a cartoon would, or just like a show on Netflix would. And of course, visual diversity is key in doing so. Before leaving for the Kutsumateen earlier this year, I prayed for rain. And I prayed for rain because I wanted to make an image that was relatable. I wanted to make an image that was memorable. I wanted to make an image that would transport you to the Kutsumateen, and so you'd get to know the bears a little more. I read a lot of the cognitive science literature because they're telling us that you need to make sense of place images in a way to make stories memorable. This is the Kutsumateen in all its glory. And so as I begin to think about a story, of course I need a stage, of course I need a backdrop, and so I often take an afternoon or multiple afternoons just to make those images that are speaking about the backdrop of the Kutsumateen. This is what the Kutsumateen looks like. On a day when it started to rain, it looked like it was snowing, and so my camera turns into a paintbrush and I begin to make images that may not make the magazine, but they certainly lend themselves to just expressing the textures and the colors of this place. And if any of you have had a chance to handhold the 600, Nikon's newest 600, that's that much lighter than the old one, you can appreciate from a Zodiac, you can begin to start painting all sorts of really lovely images. And I gravitate to ones like this because they're different. We've all seen a grizzly bear photograph already. We need to be making something more unique, something more different. And so this gives me a chance to express my own personal commitment to the project and to the bears. If a picture can have a smell, can a picture have a smell? Can a picture have a feel? Can a picture have a texture? Can a picture have a temperature? And if so, are those images more relatable? And I got lost in this composition of colors and compositions and textures and lines and all sorts. But there comes a point, just like a presentation like I'm doing today, where you have to create some sort of contrast. You have to advance the story forward before people get bored. And so you need those images that create a sense of excitement. In some cases, perhaps a sense of urgency. On almost every one of my assignments, one of the things that I try to do is I pose a question. I try to find some sort of transformation of change. What's changing in this story? What might people side with or fight against? In this particular case, this image reminds me, do we see lumber on a hillside and minerals in the ground? Or do we see clean air and natural resources that keep not only us healthy, but the planet healthy? And then I'm constantly reminded that we can't be doom and gloom in the environmental movement like we have been for so long, because of course we need to laugh more. And so more often I'm trying to make images that give us a chance to laugh and chuckle and smile. I'm shooting more people, of course, to be able to do that. Every story has a what? Every story needs to have a hero, right? And so we particularly went to the Kutsumatine when we knew the flowering lupins would be there. And they only flower for about 2 weeks. In some cases, when the weather's bad, it's a matter of days. And so we specifically needed an image of our hero, the grizzly bear, in a scene of flowering lupins. And so, as luck would have it, we had one occasion. It was probably a 4-minute lumber. This bear just comes walking along. I was working with an amazing guide who knew how to handle the zodiac ever so well. And so we were able to make an image like this that I'm hoping turns into a fine print. And why do I want it to be a fine print? Because then I can talk to another audience. I'm often talking to the choir, and what's so exciting about being here is we've never met before, and we've perhaps never had this conversation. There's so much insight, there's so much sophistication, there's so many ideas in this room. What if we started to talk about conservation using all of those ideas? The fine print may give me a chance to do that. There's other heroes in the Kutsumatine as well. This is Alan Maxwell on the left and Norman Faithfull on the right. They're members of the Gitsi tribe of the Coast Shimsham First Nations. And believe it or not, Alan and Norman have been hanging out in the Kutsumatine for close to 30 years. They live in a floating shack. It's just the two of them. Their partners get to visit every once in a while. But you don't have to convince them that there's this people and planet connection that's important, not only to themselves, but to the bears as well. So the Kutsumatine is a case study where people and planet are living in harmony. It's one of the best places where you can interact with grizzly bears in the wild, very safely, very sustainably, in a very ethical way. But the trouble is there's not enough of these sanctuaries, particularly in Pacific Northwest Canada. And so if this work can lend itself to a conversation with the right people, we might be able to advance the idea that we need more protected places around the world. We need more areas where bears and people can interact. Has anyone had a chance to see grizzly bear in the wild by any chance? A couple hands. What's really so relevant about the grizzly bear story right now, and some of you may have caught wind of this, but just this past month, the BC government have put a full ban on grizzly bear hunting. And why is that important? Because in ecotourism, we can be making more money for people and for bears. It is worth a show of hands. Yeah, we put a full ban on the grizzly bear hunt. So it's not to say that my photography had an integral role to play in that conversation. It's just to say that the photography can be a way to begin those conversations with the right people who have the power and who have the influence to bring about that conversation. Before every assignment, I try to think of one single image that I could share with people. One single image that may have an expression of the story, an expression of what the narrative is about. And in this particular case, I'm gravitating towards this particular image. I have this argument with my dad because my dad says he wants the bear to be looking at the viewer. And I feel the complete opposite way. I love the fact that this bear seems at peace. This bear perhaps is unoffended by my presence, which shares a really nice story as well. If any of you have ever photographed tigers in the wild or, well, really any sort of animal where you have a bit of chance to spend some time with it, when they turn their back to you, this is an expression of respect. And this is an expression that they feel safe, that they feel comfortable around you. This is a wide-angle lens. You can tell that I'm not too far away. And the animal seems at peace. The animal seems like it belongs there. And it's a wide-angle image because I needed to make a photograph that also told you what the habitat looked like. And so there's not too many places in the world that are as lovely as the Pacific Northwest, where you get the mist and the cover of the trees and the mountains. And so in this particular case, what happens is in the springtime, the grizzly bears come out of their dens. that are up in the mountains. They travel down towards the estuary where they can feed, believe it or not, mostly on the grass and the sedge that's here. So I needed an image that combined a little bit of art. Perhaps it's nice to look at. I needed an image that talked about the ecology of the animal. And I also needed an image that presented the species in the habitat that it calls home. I shared this on social media the other day. I sometimes have a hard time talking about the environment, such as in places like this, because we're distracted by so many other things. And I'm starting to build this narrative about home. So if we replace the word environment with home, is this conversation perhaps a little more relatable? Is this conversation perhaps something that we could continue to have at CES, where again, we could use the innovation and the sophistication of the people in this room to advance an agenda like this? I'm optimistic the universality power of photography will persist, and of course we're moving more and more towards motion, but it's images like this that I truly do think share an important message, and that message again is we're not apart from nature, but very much a part of it. So thanks so much. I've left a couple minutes just for a couple questions or so, and I'll repeat the question so everyone gets a chance to hear. So with the few minutes we have left, perhaps a question from the crowd. Yeah, please go ahead. So the question was, we're going back to the early part of my presentation. I drew an image, I pre-visualized an image with a reflection, and happy to report, yeah, we got a number of them. And the trouble is I shoot horizontally so often because I'm constantly thinking about the double spread in a magazine. In the case of the reflections, a lot of them are really nice verticals. And yeah, we lucked out. Thanks for asking. Yeah, you had a quick question. So the question is, how do we, as conservation photographers, decide what issue or decide what topic we're going to cover, what story to do? Does that sound about right? Yeah, and a lot of it's in here, a lot of it's passion. They're passion projects, a lot of them. But of course, the grizzly bears was just something so very timely. The grizzly bear hunt was something in the Canadian news that was getting a lot of attention, and so I thought it was my responsibility to head in that direction, to contribute how I can. Another good example is some of you may have caught wind that we're still thinking about exploration in the Arctic refuge, where there happens to be one of the largest migrations, one of the largest populations of caribou, and so I'm going to be spending a good chunk of my time this coming year focusing in on that story. Why? Because we've got to tell that story now. So all of the drone people that might be in the crowd, we're going to need your footage for sure. And yeah, something that I wanted to mention, this question's reminded me of, is how cool is it that we're here at CES talking about this? How cool is it that Nikon, who have such incredible photographers like Joe and Michelle Valberg, and sports photographers and street photographers, commercial photographers, people flying in ultralights, and they've taken a chance on a conservation photographer. So I couldn't be more thrilled and honored, and yeah, it's about a conversation. Maybe one last question and then we'll wrap up. I think there's a minute left and they want us being on time. Last question for anyone? Okay, well, we'll wrap it up then. If you want to talk, oh, there is one more. One more time. One more time, sorry. You have a question? Okay, let's talk after. Yeah, you bet. Folks, thank you for your time. I know there's all sorts of things to see here. So again, thanks for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, Neil, Ever, Osborne, Neo here at the Nikon Theater. Stick around. We have more programs to come.